With an increase in droughts and developments, what does West Newbury need to do to maintain our water supply?
I don't know if most people know this. The water department is a separate enterprise fund in town, and it has three water commissioners who oversee it, and then they take care of the employees within the water department. So the select board does not interact intimately with the water department. It's like a separate business within town. We have a well field down next to the reservoir in Newburyport that we pump water out of, and then we buy excess water from Newburyport when we need it. So the responsibility for maintaining that part of the water quality is on Newburyport. Our water department does maintain our own, takes good care of it. The select board over the past 3 years, we've gone to town meeting and requested $50,000 in each of the cycles. And what we have used that money for is the first time we did we hired an engineering firm to look at all the parcels in town which we would be allowed to drill for more water on. And they gave us a list, a whole matrix of parcels and restrictions and things like that. And then we started drilling on these parcels. We've attacked the first two and not had the best results that we would like. So we're still looking at a third parcel. Our water needs, historically, we were just looking at some charts a couple of weeks ago, have dropped drastically. What has happened is people have learned to conserve water. So our water utilization is drastically down. So as far as supply, we're in good condition. Newburyport maintains their purification, and our water department takes care of it on our end, and they do a great job. I am not a water person. This is one of, like I say, 100 things the select board deals with. It's a good question because at one point I said the same thing. Why can't we, there are a lot of regulations as to taking water out of it. And don't forget, you've got sewage coming down in the first place. You would need a purification plant and all those kind of things. Groundwater is probably my expectation, a more reliable source of clean water. We had looked, just as I was getting on the board, they'd been looking at a parcel down on the river to drill wells in down there. But the problem is once they did the analysis, they realized it was in the flood zone. And if it flooded, the infrastructure would get damaged as well as the groundwater itself would be contaminated and not usable. So it's same expectation that it's probably not your best option for clean and financially viable water.
Well, I think responsible development is number one. I've seen firsthand, growing up closer to metropolitan areas like Boston or that overgrown fast is not good. You have to think of a lot of things. Our water issue is a big issue in this town. We're getting water from Newburyport. We're running out of water in the summer times where we have restrictions and stuff like that. And Newburyport is building like crazy, so they're taking away from a little bit of the supply in which we all need to use. How do we come around that? Well, we have to figure out a way to be able to live and be able to maintain with the supplies we have and figure out other maybe avenues, maybe ways to store water, right? Water tanks, stuff like that. Maybe find alternate sources for water. There's a lot of things we could think about, but, working in the civil engineering working in construction and stuff, I could see how when you build too fast, it puts a strain on the infrastructure. The infrastructure is number one, right? So how do we live? We need water, right? Is water, becoming an issue? Yes. Okay. And then we got to slow down the build a little bit. All right. We got to figure out how we can maintain how we're living as a community and be able to, if we want to expand, be able to obtain more water or use water more efficiently, in different ways and stuff. And there's a number of ways you could do that, but at the same time, it's if you build, you're going to surpass your infrastructure, and now you're going to be behind the 8 ball on a lot of things, and that's terrible for everything, and not just for water too. I mean, that goes for your roads, that goes for your schools, that goes for your power grid. I know a lot of times people, this is kind of what got me into want to run for select board in the first place, was because the NAPS nursery in the whole MBTA overlay, and how I believe Baker put it into law years ago, how any community that was touching the MBTA would have to do this overlay, and for more condensed, residential living, right? Which is fine in certain avenues if certain towns can handle that. West Newbury is a small suburban rural town. I mean, we couldn't survive if you built a giant apartment complex, overnight. Our infrastructure is not there. And my biggest concern was always about, let's look at the big picture. Let's look how we're going to expand. Obviously, people are going to be selling land. People, farms might be closed, and people might want to develop this land. And I have no problem with developing, but we have to be responsible developing. I think that's number one. You have to look at what you have for resources, and now you have to look at what you have for ability to use those resources. And if one is the resources are small, but you want to do big, it's not going to work. It's never going to work, And I think that's probably my biggest concern with the water situation. And we just have to look at alternate, see what other communities are doing. All right, 'cause I'm sure we're not the only community that has a water issue, right? I'm sure that's all around the state. But what are they doing? And is it working for them? And if it isn't working for them, maybe we invest some time and we talk to some people who are professionals in this aspect, right? So they know a little bit better than, you and I, right? Who can handle the situation and see what they do. I'm sure there's a solution for everything. If they can put giant communities in the middle of the desert with no water supply, right? A town that literally is on the water, could figure out a way to, grab the water or some source and figure out what we're going to do with it, Yeah, it's the storing and storing of water and the infrastructure. I think is definitely something that we have to look into. I know a lot of towns will use, water towers is one solution to do it. You store it up when the water is abundant, like, springtime when the snow is melting and all that stuff. And you're able to tap into it, when summertime and there's a high demand for water, But, overall, if water is essential for life, and it's also essential for public safety too, when it comes down to hydrants and other avenues like that, maintaining water pressure and maintaining a sufficient amount of water in case there's ever an emergency is, on the top of, probably everyone's list in this town for, water, right? And they think about it.